Episode 133 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast. Jason Bryant back here with you with Matt Dernlan from our RUDIS studios in Central Ohio. And what an interesting development, not just in the world of wrestling, not just in the world of sports, but in the world in general. Matt Dernlan, of course, we're focused on wrestling, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. But the news that was kind of being rumored, it was being touched on, the 2020 Olympic Games have been postponed by the IOC. Tokyo will not be our home in July and August this year. It's going to be 2021. And Matt, this is wild.
I mean, unprecedented for sure. And we're all being affected. This is such a fluid conversation. I think this is something that we thought was probably coming down the pipe at some point. We thought it was a factual statement yesterday, but that was just a board member from the IOC saying this is what the takeaway was. We heard the official announcement this morning, I believe, that it was officially postponed. So yeah, I think we're all operating on new realities every single day. To your point, you're jumping into homeschool for the first time. So I'm sure that's a new venture at the Bryant household. Fortunately for myself, we used to homeschool our girls for about 6 years. So it was kind of like dusting off the books, rebooting the curriculums and, putting the teacher hat back on for my wife. But yeah, I mean, it's the realities of everyone's existence is upside down. It seems like Minnesota's seems like about a week behind from us. I think this is the first week you guys didn't go back to school, Jason.
Well, it depends on the school district. Fortunately, my kids were on spring break last. Well, my youngest is in Montessori school, which doesn't, apply to the school system. It's just around the corner. It's basically at this point she's 3, so it's not really school, but she says it's school. But my second grader, she was on spring break, and we got a note late last week that school was going to be canceled and through March 27th. Now we're starting to get notes that the kids' stuff's being packed up and they're going to be sent home. Well, they're not going to be sent home. We're going to be able to pick up things, and they're going to give Chromebooks to basically every kid in the school district. And we live in the Mounds View School District, which, if anybody's familiar with the high schools in the state of Minnesota, we've got Irondale High School, which is actually the alma mater of one Road Warrior Animal, and Mounds View High School, which is actually where Marty Morgan's kids go. So if you're familiar with those type of schools, it's one of the better school districts in the state of Minnesota, which is why we moved here. And some school districts don't have that option. We're at least fortunate where we've got some devices and stuff, and with the way technology works, my daughter Lucy has been playing with this program called IXL, which is like a math program, which has curriculums and tutorials and things like that. So we've already set up math time in the morning, trying to keep the kids in terms of what they're used to when lunchtime is, when it's time to go outside, when it's time to do math, when it's time to read. So it's not necessarily the homeschool teaching like you and your wife are used to. It's basically just kind of following along with the curriculum that the kids have, and this puts everything into disarray because we're not talking wrestling here, but this is a wrestling household. I mean, our life doesn't revolve around wrestling, but a lot of our scheduling involves my travel. My wife and I both do international travel, so that has put that to a kibosh. Now, she's also had to coordinate a giant call center with her particular company and getting everybody to work from home with the technical support and customer service calls. So you're putting a couple hundred people that were in a call center into their homes and getting all that stuff situated. So it has been stressful just for this household. And I can totally relate to those who are out there right now who are sitting there going, well, now what am I going to do? I don't have a job to go to. I can't make any money because, again, this isn't about me here, but just as an example, I'm a contractor in a lot of the things I do. So with there's no events for me to announce, there's no events for me to work, and there's fewer events for me to get paid. So, I mean, directly just from a small little slice of what this does to the economy, especially the wrestling economy, this hits me personally hard. Real hard, because if there's no events for me to talk about, what income can I make from them, and what's the benefit of people listening to the content that's not about shows? We're dealing with that here. We've got to figure out what we're going to do with content here. But back to the school thing. I mean, it's disrupted a lot of things, and we're going to have to adapt. And thankfully, my wife's a rock star, so we've got plans involved. And that there's that word that I think it's been used a ton of times. It's been fluid. there's good luck scheduling things 2 weeks out in advance. It's just not going to happen because you don't know what's going to happen. So as far as the school goes, yeah, we're off. The governor's, ordered them, closed at this point. My home state of Virginia, back in Virginia, they've closed up shop for the year. My older sister is a teacher. She's an 8th grade teacher. And so, she went from, they're teaching online. I mean, there's so many different things. I mean, what we're doing now with video, for example, is what we're going to have our kids are going to be doing. So everybody all of a sudden is going to be doing Zoom meetings and stuff. So it is going to be a real crash course in technology and learning, not just for people that have jobs to do and try to work remotely, but for teaching our kids. I mean, you can't go into wrestling practice. There's so many things that this goes. I mean, so many tangents that we can go off on here. But yeah, we're a little behind. But again, we didn't miss a whole lot of school. And with my oldest being, she missed 40 days last week, 40 days last year because she had, she was in and out of the hospital. But this year has been great. So thankfully, we're not behind in that regard as far as this household goes. But I can definitely understand how people are really feeling the pinch on this already.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations. There's, health and safety realities. There's financial realities that we're all, wrapping our mind around. But
it personalizes it too, Matt. I mean, there's something that we're here to talk about the athletes in the sport of wrestling, but this situation personalizes it for every single one of us in the sport. Because, as we'll touch on here in a second, the athletes, what are they going to do? Their entire livelihoods are at stake because the Olympics is the pinnacle in the sport of wrestling. Then again, everybody that's essentially the team behind the team is what the USOPC likes to say. Everybody that's support for all these Olympic sports are involved. And then, trickles right down to people that run youth tournaments and such. I mean, everything in our sport is impacted by this.
Yeah, and you can look at the announcement of the Olympics and you can probably follow a logical trajectory saying, okay, that probably means most likely Fargo is not going to happen. If the Olympics, if the pinnacle of athletic competition isn't going to take place, I bet our premier our high school competition is going to take place in Fargo in the middle of to the end of July. So those are logical progressions that you can probably see playing out and we're planning for. And I think everybody, whatever your life is, you can pinpoint specific events on your calendar that are directly related to either your personal life or your professional life. And those have been affected. And I think, the world that we're living in and we want to focus on is wrestling. And it seems like there's going to be a bigger interruption than we anticipated, even though we probably could have projected it. Everybody wants to hold out an element of hope because, I think that's the next thing we're looking for is that first sign of life, the first sign of hope, like something's coming back. And, I guess, in our space where we are making some stuff, globally, there is some positive news from the Far East where it looks like some of the factories and some of the work is getting back to work. So those are positive signs that some parts of the world are, activating again and not business as usual, but business is operating. So, I guess we just kind of project on that. And right now, I think what everybody needs is people need a bit of release. In times like this, I'm sure everybody's getting stir crazy. There's only so much time you can listen, watch Red Box or Prime or whatever your streaming device is, but you want to keep connected to what your passions are. And I think this is an important time to, whatever we talk about wrestling, it's important to a lot of people. There's a passion here. There's an audience here that wants to stay engaged and connected to what we're all passionate about. So I think whatever news of wrestling we can discuss, I think is important in this time.
Yeah, and it's funny because everybody's talking about Tiger King right now. We kind of cut off Netflix while we were waiting for the next season of Ozark to come out. I understand that's coming. But one thing from a programming note here, too. So one thing that a lot of these media outlets, and we're involved in that group and my various podcast network, is there's still going to be content. And we're going to get creative with content. And I know one thing that Matt and I had talked about that we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of our better memories of things we remember from certain events that may be coming up on the calendar. Now, you brought up Fargo, and everybody that knows me in the sport of wrestling knows how much that city, that tournament, that event has meant to my career. I mean, I met everybody in wrestling in Fargo. I mean, I joke about it. You know, I've got a picture of me at 19 years old standing next to Bruce Baumgartner. I mean, this guy was my wrestling idol. I've played Silver Strike bowling with the late Jeff Blatnick. I beat Kendall Cross in foosball and Greg Jones in darts. Yes, I'm name dropping like crazy, but it's like it's one of those situations where Fargo was my central hub of meeting places. And now I have a nephew that lives in Fargo right now. He's supposed to get married in Fargo at the end of July, or end of June. Who knows if that's going to happen now with the way things work, but it's going to take an act of God to prevent me from going to Fargo. And it's a global pandemic. My 21-year streak is in danger. How dare you, coronavirus? Now I realize I'm poking fun there, but we've got to keep the mood light. We're going to have some topics. We're going to do things that are, wrestling people are going to maybe scratch their heads about, but you know what? There's going to be, we joke about it being Rushmore season, right? Like once college wrestling season's over, like, okay, give me the greatest this, the greatest that. The amount of internet memes that are going around right now about where you've lived or the wrestling picture thing, those are really good things to generate discussion to keep us all sane. So we're going to be borrowing some of those ideas. And I know, Matt, you and I had talked about, my first NCAA tournament was 2002. We'll touch on the memories we have from our first events and big matches and things like that on future episodes to stay topical and relevant and entertaining. But as of right now, we're still focusing on the postponement, and I guess we got to just get right to it. There are so many different things to discuss here about what's it going to do to the athletes. Olympic red shirts, just, you want to talk about a can of worms. This thing is this is a case of worms.
Yeah, so we're starting to transition away from the NCAA season. Obviously, the pinnacle of the NCAA, the culminating event was supposed to take place this weekend. It looks like from what we're hearing, it doesn't look like the NCAA is going to restore the eligibility of the student athletes that competed this year. And we're waiting for final clarification on that, but I think we discussed that last week, and the discussions I had on some interviews or some podcasts last week, we dove into the realities of that situation and why I know on a fairness level, these student athletes that were denied an opportunity to compete at the NCAA tournament, I get where, it's a harsh thing. I don't think their eligibility is going to be restored. Just because I was talking to a coaching buddy this morning, and we're thinking about just the implications of an athletic program, one individual program, a wrestling program, restoring eligibility, and the financial ramifications that, just one program would incur by restoring extra scholarships for a year, whatever they decided was the best means, if that were a possibility. But I was talking to a coaching buddy today, and they're locking down universities, the financials of all universities. They're freezing spending. They're looking for spending approvals. So, we're talking about solvencies of academic institutions, let alone an athletic program within an athletic, which is just one small department within the overall operations of an academic institution. So I think there's going to be financial realities that hit just the feasibility and the solvency of some higher level academic institutions. So I think there's greater problems for the world of higher education than restoring people's eligibility. And I know I don't mean to sound harsh or callous, but I think there's greater realities to that. But turning our attention to the Olympic red shirts, wow, that, what does this do moving forward to these guys that sat in Olympic red shirt? Will some of these guys stay in Olympic red shirt? Well, Yanni, since it looks like right now it's looking towards 2021, does Ironman stay in Olympic red shirt? Does the whole Cornell contingent stay in red shirt again? Will they be granted another Olympic red shirt? And what requirements? Because there are, for a college athlete to take an Olympic year, you have to meet the qualifications basically from the previous year. Are they grandfathered in? Will those same requirements, since everything has been froze from a competition standpoint, will they extend that red shirt into next year? So that's just scratching the surface, JB, right?
Yeah, and then back to your point about colleges, for example. If you're a university, I mean, what type of situation are you going to try to mitigate your crowds? Well, if you're a D1 football program, well, that's you think University of Michigan's going to let 100,000 plus into the big house? I mean, it's one of those things like, okay, it's a classroom of 40 students is one thing, 100,000 is another, and then you have to try to figure out. I haven't even really put much thought in that. It just popped into my head. I'm just like, are they going to allow that? And then you realize like certain schools that do make money on athletics. I mean, the vast majority of them lose money. It's not there solely as a money-making enterprise, but part of the academic and athletic experience is part of that college experience. So how much of a role do we see programs shuttered? Do we see schools say, all right, we're not going to do sports for a year because we can't afford to keep this, or 2 years? Or are we going to just see the big ones? I mean, I'm worried about the long-term implications because starting back over again, I don't think it's as easy as, okay, everybody's back. The longer this goes, the bigger issues we're going to have with college athletics. Now, in terms of the 2020 thing with Yanni, I think what we learned in this 2019-2020 season is nothing is a given. You can't take a season for granted. So now, well, I'm lucky I sat out in one respect as well. I'm lucky I sat out. I didn't lose that year. Well, you don't know what the future is going to bring. So if you get a season next year and you're like, well, maybe I go pitch count. Maybe I go out there and compete because I never know what's going to happen. Because, okay, yeah, Olympic red shirt's great when, in theory, but then at some point, like, okay, we got guys that came back, Matt Kolodjik's like, crap. He got 2 months of the season. So you're just not even that really. So the curiosity is how many people that if they do get the opportunity for an Olympic red shirt, who's just going to go out there and say, screw it. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to go out and compete no matter what. I can't sit for 2 years and get maybe, there's with all these events too, you peak for certain events. Well, you don't even have those events to peak. So you don't even know all that training. What's that leading to? So I really am curious on how many people, if the option for an Olympic red shirt does resurface, if everything comes back to normal, how many people rethink their position, be like, screw it. I'm just going to wrestle because I want to wrestle.
Yeah, I mean, you look in the case of some Olympic level athletes, they've already qualified the weight. Like Stefan Micic, he's already qualified the weight, correct? So what is he's already qualified into the Olympics. So what does he do in that situation?
Yeah, it's not like, Serbia is more of a Greco nation, and, there's a handful of guys that wrestle freestyle there. But again, it's predominantly a Greco nation. He's a freestyler. I mean, the jokes about him and Dayton Fix being 30 when they finally get their last year of eligibility. I think one of the jokes I saw this morning on Twitter was Micic is going to get 3 Olympic red shirts. I mean,
yeah, he would essentially, and we joke about this, but I think the reality is he would be closer to 8 years removed from high school than 4 years removed from high school if he actually takes.
Well, Tanner Hall was eligible to go to his 10-year high school reunion this year, and he was still an NCAA athlete. So let's just consider that. He actually is old enough to rent a car.
Wow. That's more than half of our employees here at RUDIS.
You probably want Tanner Hall driving your van than Zeke Jones, because I've driven with Zeke. It's not quite as bad as Steve Martin driving a van, but Zeke's a little treacherous driving that thing.
Yeah, so it should be it's going to be an interesting discussion because I think some teams specifically, like you look at Michigan and Cornell, what they did with their Olympic red shirts, and it looked like it was a strategic choice. Yes. Did all these guys have legitimate chances to make the final Olympic trials? Yes. But it also provided the opportunity to be loaded for bear come the 2020-2021 season. So you wouldn't think that they would say, okay, we're going to, because the opportunities are limited. When you're loaded up, like a Cornell or an Iowa or potentially where Michigan could be next year, you don't get many of those situations, and those situations aren't guaranteed a lot as we see. There's very few times when things go according to plan. So it should be interesting how programs pivot, adjust, and what their game plan is moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, so many things. That's the thing. We really don't have a path here. We don't know what's been mapped out. So we don't know what's going to happen. And one thing I want to bring up, though, about the loading up is, we see, I think we talked about Michigan doing it, and every couple of years is a team that feels like they can load up and use that Olympic red shirt. And honestly, it doesn't really, none of those teams win titles. So it's one of those things where, are we putting too much stock into loading up for the future when, like we've seen, like, just wrestle. I mean, this year's a lost year. That's the one thing that I think stings the most right now is we're still in recovering and in the shock of there was not 40,000 people in Minneapolis this past weekend. I woke up Saturday morning and I'm sitting there going, what the hell? I mean, I was supposed to have people over. I honestly planned for this for 3 years once I heard about the bid. So I'm like so many others. There's so many things about this event, and, we're getting to the actual topic of the tournament, but it's just, it disrupts so much. And again, it's like, where do we go? Where do we go from here? Where do the red shirts go? Where do the events go? What is Minneapolis going to get a shot? I mean, we still got the Olympics we're talking about. I mean, there's just so many different moving pieces. I guess, again, there's that word, fluid. Nothing's really staying in the same place. You turn one thing one way and it's gonna drift over here, and then you try to line it back up, it's gonna drift back over there, and it's my head's about to explode, Matt. It really is.
And the reality of this, like, look at now, turning our attention back to the Olympics, what it's going to do if it's postponed into 2020, it's going to provide a better opportunity for some individuals to make the team because they'll have a full concentrated year to focus. Say, you look at a guy like Seth Gross, who was wrestling, but also planning to make the Olympic team 2 weeks later. Now it gives him an opportunity to focus an entire year, and I'm sure one of his biggest things, like, can I still make 57 in a year?
Well, he's got that time now to actually do the whole shrink your body thing and maybe not be as brutal because, the first country that really came out to say, hey, if this is going on was Canada. And, Danielle Lappage and Erica Wee both were in the press up in Canada talking about how they're disappointed, but they support their country's decision. And then, it's funny that Canada took the lead on this. Well, that's not funny. It's just, when we see Canada take the lead, and then there's still some pushback here. At this point, if you were questioning the severity of it 2 weeks ago, I don't think anybody would really, okay, I can get that. Now you're questioning it, the severity, and I think it would be irresponsible if we even try to go to Tokyo in 2020, and I think the IOC has seen that as well, and the amount of countries that would threaten to pull out. Australia also made a point. It's like, okay, best of a bad situation. Yeah, it does put lives on hold for a year. It doesn't put lives in danger. I think that's the key point that we should also look at. And no matter what your opinion is on, if you still think it's overblown, well, that's on you. If you don't think it's overblown, that's on you too. Fine. Your opinion is your opinion. It's your prerogative to believe what you believe. But when you're putting people into a situation that could be harmful, the best thing I think they did was postpone it. I'm disappointed. Obviously, it's like the parent. I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. I think that's the feeling we all have right now. So, and then I have seen mixed reactions from athletes. But I mean, if you're in you're getting to the long in the tooth in your career, what's an extra year going to do? I mean, does that make you another step slower? So, athletes like Jordan Burroughs into their 30s. He's talked about 2020 was it. Well, now is it 2021? I mean, what's that do for his training? He's training smarter, not harder. I mean, we've got so many athletes that are this is probably going to end up, rather than rushing it and having athletes not there, we're going to have a full games hopefully in 2021. So I think we should also look at the bright side of, all right, well, we're not going to have it in Tokyo for 2020. That's going to suck. Our summer is going to be devoid of live sports. We get that. I'd rather have a summer of alive sports than not, I mean, that might be a little bit of hyperbole, but still, I mean, I think ultimately 2021 is we get a year to get through this and see what happens.
Yeah. Fortunately, the opportunity hasn't been eliminated. It's just been postponed. So everybody's hopes and dreams and ambitions are still on the table. It's just going to be pushed back. And to your point, for some athletes, it's going to have possibly a detrimental effect. I don't think I look at Jordan Burroughs and yeah, it's another year, but looking through everything that that man has had to go through over the last 10 years to compete at the level that he has, to overcome adversity, to overcome, injuries, overcome the young bucks nipping at his heels. I don't think this is going to deter him. It's just going to be, an added obstacle that he has to work through. But, the one thing that I was thinking about, I know there's been a lot of discussion back and forth about, the pros and the cons of RTCs, but the one benefit that I think everybody can agree, and it could be unbalanced, I get it, but the opportunity for these athletes to continue to compete and have a financial outlet to make it feasible for them to compete, that's a benefit, looking into 2021, that there's a little bit more stability on the training front for a lot of these athletes than would have been the case even 10 years ago. These opportunities to train at RTCs and get funding opportunities where you don't have to go look for a job, or the realities for a lot of these athletes, if the RTCs weren't in place today in their living form, is I think a lot of these athletes would be faced with the easy but tough decision of like, the money's dried up. I just can't do it for another year. Where's this money going to come from? Well, that's not the point. So it's still difficult for a lot of these athletes, but it's financially a little bit more feasible for them to continue on this journey for another year.
Well, also let's also look at the RTC standpoint for one thing. Most of these are on college campuses. They don't have standalone facilities. They're not even allowed on campus right now. So there's that detriment. What's to say these okay, I'm going to continue my career with the RTC, and you've got no facility to train in. They're having to go into places that, private clubs and private facilities, and maybe even some high schools that aren't closed. That's just going to be a matter of time. So there's that component of it. Okay, I'm going to stick with the RTC. I can tough it out. Where am I going to train in the meantime? That right there is, that right there to me is probably one of the biggest issues right now with athletes being able to stay 100%.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, even
they're going to hang out in Matt Dernlan's basement.
Yeah, so I've been in contact with our athletes, and everybody's trying to figure this out right now. Like, where can I actually train? Like, there's minimal opportunities. Like, campuses are shut down. Like, literally, you can't get in. Even if you want to, you're denied. These campuses are shut down. So I think everybody's being creative. I know last week, Frank Molinaro was in town, training with Lou Rosselli and some guys in Columbus at a private location. But yeah, they literally flew halfway across the country to find a training opportunity. So I think I think at this point, probably the best thing is, okay, we have clarity. We know the games are going to be postponed. So these athletes can probably step away, since most of these athletes were in their peaking phase, looking 2 weeks out at the Olympic trials. So they'll probably just reboot, step away, get refreshed, get recharged, any injuries that they've been dealing with, trying to heal them up. But yeah, probably the best opportunity is that these athletes aren't training with each other right now, and they're forced into taking a break, which is probably collectively and globally is probably the best thing.
Yeah, and you also bring up the fact that, Frank had to fly in. Well, flights are they're starting to be limited, or I haven't even looked at if I was going to go back to fly home in June like I had planned. Well, is that going to happen? Probably not. So, the opportunities to even get places are going to be limited, and let alone, you have people probably driving across country just to find a place to work out. It's almost a throwback to the 70s and 80s on how to find places to work out. But as we look at the Olympics too, one thing that's also, it's not lost in this, but like the IOC, because most people are like, oh, the IOC, they have so much money, who cares? Well, there's so many people in these locations that have their lives changed because of the games, and it's not just the athletes. So, like in Brazil, I think 5,000 families had to basically be relocated to build facilities down there. Now, Tokyo, a lot more developed in terms of the infrastructure there, so displacement isn't an issue. But you last Olympics in Rio, you had 50,000 volunteers. That's just 50,000 volunteers. Then you have the amount of workforce, which is the people that are actually there, that are actually paid to be there. And I'm raising my hand. I was one of those people that works those games. So you have lives of everybody that are around this, whether it's the people who are working the event, the people that the construction people that built the facilities, or the upkeep, where we're wrestling in Tokyo. I've been in the facility. That is it's a convention center type of thing. That place was not specifically built for the game. So there's people that have to manage that. Well, there are people that took time off of work, and all these things are just disrupted. Lives are going to be disrupted beyond the athletes too. I mean, the Olympics is a giant thing globally, and you have people that were coming in. I mean, we already saw the fight for tickets. So there are so many moving pieces with the Olympic Games that involve, basically, and I'm going to use that term again, the team behind the team, because there's lives are, people's livelihoods are marketing the games or broadcasting the games. Guys like Doug Brooker, you might know him from the Big Ten Network. He worked at Iowa Public Television for years. He's the guy, directing things with the Olympic Broadcasting Service for wrestling. So, his preparation every 4 years has changed. I mean, these are just little cogs in the giant machine, but there's so many different people impacted by this, and it's not just the athletes too. It's just I guess I'm having a hard time, Matt, wrapping my head around the scope of, because the Olympics, man, that is say what you want about it, and commercialization, and swimming's got 9 billion sports, and wrestling's got we're at 6 and 6, but it's still the Olympics. It still has the ability to make lives happen. Outside of the United States, somebody wins an Olympic medal, they're a hero. They're set for life. Like in Cuba, Lopez was going to come back. That guy is, he's made basically a living off winning Olympic medals. So there's guys like him in every country. Somebody that wins a marathon or wins a race from this country that's, they get talked about once every 4 years. It's life-changing. And, we talk about our wrestlers and, putting their life on hold for a year. Some of these people this is their shot. They don't have that opportunity. I guess that's the one thing that's just like, again, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around, is the impact this has on the global sports world too. And
again, it's the scope. I mean, when you really try and think about the scope of unifying the entire world to execute how many sports?
What's better than the torch relay, Matt? I mean, let's think about it. I mean,
it's just, that's the thing. It's such a unifying event, and I started thinking about just the global logistics of bringing the world to one place, to one small country in Tokyo. And it's just like, once you start thinking on the scale of everything that it would take to execute it, I'm like, it's mind-bending to think about how they actually execute this in a normal situation, let alone with certain restrictions and certain safeguards that, even if potentially the games were to move forward in 2020, how do you actually do that with all the restrictions and safeguards that we've had to set up well in advance? I don't know how you actually work around it to actually pull the trigger to execute the games in a timely manner. I
think that's the general feeling. We don't know. Now, one thing that we still have to point out, and the games aren't gone. The games are not gone. They're postponed. And it's, there's, again, the difference between canceled and postponed is significant in the world of sports. It's one of those things, it was canceled, it'll be rescheduled. Well, then it was postponed. Semantics. I'm a semantic nerd. Everybody that knows me knows that. When we look at the issues that this creates back with college wrestling, one of the things that's been discussed a lot now is the transfer portal. What happens if everything comes back as normal and say nothing changes? I don't think that's going to be the case. I think we're going to have some changes that we didn't expect. But say nothing changes. Everybody's coming back. Whether you got the extra year of eligibility or not, you've got all this stuff. Well, what's going to happen? We've got coaching changes coming down the pipe. We've got training situations. Now, what if one of those things happens where a program is like, all right, we're going to shutter for a year, whether it be Division I or the NAIA? Kids are going to have to find places to go. So the curiosity is the Olympic red shirts. You going to get another one? Okay. What's this do to the transfer portal? And that's one thing. It's just that's another can of worms. That's like, whoa, we weren't thinking about this.
Yeah, and you look at it. One prime example is Matthew Klodzik. You can't wrestle as a grad student in the Ivy League. You could get enrolled and entered into a master's program or a PhD program, but you can't compete for the Ivy Leagues if you're in a graduate program. So if by some realm of the imagination he were given another year of eligibility and he wanted to come back, he would have to do it somewhere else. Most likely, if he's completed his degree. Like,
I think Kolat might have. I think this might be his 7th semester. So again, it's because the Ivies, you've got 8 semesters. So potential now this is getting a little bit off topic from the transfer portal, but I did receive a call from I know Jim Gibbons brought this up and saying, okay, what if they, an alternative once we get back to normal is just wrestle the championships, but do it in the fall semester. Do it. You don't give them a year. You give that tournament. Okay, all you athletes are eligible. You've got 1 month to get ready for it. We're going to wrestle the tournament here. It's 1 semester. So technically, some of those guys like Tucker, who I think had an extra semester as well, the Naval Academy guy, the Service Academy guys are going to be SOL on this one because it's pretty much done. They're probably ready to go. But the option's like, okay, all 330, you get your tournament in the fall semester. You don't get a whole year. You get your event in the fall semester, and maybe that keeps a guy like Kolat potentially. I'm not sure his academic situation. I think he might have that one last semester to go, and then going two spring semesters is kind of tough in the Ivy. I don't think you can quite do that. I have to reach out to Chris Ayers on how that works there. But again, it's one of those things. An option is, okay, let's just do this tournament in the fall semester, and hopefully we can salvage it. But that also brings another that's another topic entirely. But
so yeah, based on your take, JB, my first takeaway would be, I'm sure the NCAA is looking at all possibilities. Every possible alternative probably is on the table, but they have to be realistic about what's feasible. But they just lost a heck of a lot of money. So the sooner they get their championships, any championship back on the field of play, they're going to do that, I'm sure. But with that, I don't know the feasibility of the NCAA being able to operate a full field of winter championships, because I know we're talking specifically for wrestling, but that just opens Pandora's box up for every other winter championship.
Right, because you do one, you have to do for the other.
Yeah, so I don't know how the NCAA could feasibly operate all the winter championships while fielding all the fall championships as well. I mean, that's a full docket. I mean, that the NCAA has their hands full just with the fall championship season, let alone combining 2 of the season together into one, and then turning around and operating those same winter championships 4, 5, 6 months later. I get the idea, and that's a novel approach. I just think it's probably unrealistic.
Yeah, I mean, kicking around all things. I mean, if we were just in a vacuum and it was just wrestling, yeah, we could probably find ways to do it. But again, there's so many what-if scenarios that we really haven't had time to really vet, okay, what's going to happen here, what's going to happen here, what's going to happen here. I've always been one of the folks that say, hey, back to the whole dual meet versus tournament thing. Why can't we do 2 championships? Well, this is why, because you have to apply it both, and no other sport has 2 championships. The asterisk is track. Well, guess what? Indoor and outdoor track are treated as 2 separate sports. Their athletes are treated as 2 separate athletes. So, that's the one thing that, it's one of those type of situations. You can't do something for one and not the other in terms of, giving athletes the fairness, because, yeah, we have a caste system in college athletics. We have the Division I, the Power 5. They get the big piece of chicken, whereas the D3 athletes typically have to pay to get to that table. So it's weird situations where you gotta Elite 90 is an academic award that tells you the 90 stands for the 90 championship sports. 90 of them. The NCAA has to run 90 of these things. So when you have to do canceling, unfortunately sucks, but to do for one, you do have to do for the other. And that's the one drawback, and that's probably the fairest thing to do. It sucks for everybody, but at least it sucks for everybody equally.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. This may sound not calloused, but I think the quicker we remove the Band-Aid and say, okay, this is what's not going to happen. This is what could still happen, but this is definitely will not happen. It'll bring closure and finality, as painful as it is, but it'll also provide the opportunity for people to get reset and truly focus on something, the new venture ahead, whatever that is. So yeah, I hurt for all these athletes and the coaches and the programs that were going to accomplish some amazing things in the previous 3 weeks. But I think we're probably going to quickly reach a point in time where like we understand what's truly possible, what's not in the realm of reality, and just move on. And I think in some ways that closure, however painful it will be good for these athletes and coaches to reset and move on. Hopefully, for the majority of them, it will be another season. Unfortunately, for a portion of them, it's looking to their career or looking beyond wrestling. And unfortunately, we've all had to reach that point in our lives at some point, and it's extremely painful for some of these athletes that we knew the opportunity that they had ahead of them, and it's never going to be there for them. But eventually, we are going to have to turn the page and start looking forward. Right now, it's just we're still in the midst of it, so it's hard to turn that page when it's such. And we've used this term several times. Such a fluid events. New information is coming out. On the hour, on the minute. So, as we're in the midst of it, I know it's hard to move on. But
yeah,
at some
and
point
we'll move on to our
to
next topic. Is one thing that's kind of lost in all this is we did have a coaching hire, somebody that we know well here with the RUDIS families. Cary Kolat left Campbell and has been named the new head coach at the United States Naval Academy. They had let the world know that Joel Sherritt would not be returning, and this is one that the fast nature kind of surprised me. And Matt, I understand we got an exclusive coming up with Cary about this in a couple days.
We do. We have an exclusive. Cary is excited about this job, but it's, I think sometimes we get caught up in the rat race and the speculation of what's the next coaching opportunity that's coming up, who's going to replace who, what domino is going to fall next, what program is going to be available. And we fail to recognize, like, as exciting as this opportunity is for Cary, it's an extremely painful one as well, because he's invested 6 years from resurrecting a program literally from life support and positioning it into a top 20 program, and the amount of effort and the amount of obstacles that he had to overcome, the level of investment and belief and buy-in from these athletes for the past 6 years to come and believe in Cary. I know it's an extremely difficult time for him and his athletes, and he's excited about this opportunity. He wants this to be an exclusive interview with us at RUDIS here in the next couple of days, but he just needed some time. He wanted some time, and he wanted some respect for his athletes to be able to absorb this. They've had to absorb two really harsh pieces of realities, like not being able to go to the NCAA championships and then losing their coach. He's like, Matt, this is a tough time for my guys. I need to be there for them, even though they hate me right now. I know they still love me, and I need to be there for them before I turn my attention. So it's going to be exciting. I think there's a lot of great opportunities for Cary at Navy. I know the world is looking at him saying, wow, I think this guy potentially could have had any job that came open with his pedigree, with his resume, what he's done at Campbell. Like, why would this guy go to Navy?
Well, they asked the same thing. Why would this guy go to Campbell 6 years ago,
Right. Right. So this is a guy that's already made one unexpected move and loved it and embraced it. And I think he's going to do the same thing. So it'll be interesting to get his perspective about why he felt so strongly about this job, and how, even though he was on the cusp of doing some really great things at Campbell, what precipitated this move and what factored into it. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Last thing I want to touch on before we wrap up this particular episode is the situation that this usually revolves when a coach changes. And we saw that, of course, we know what Virginia Tech, Iowa is the situation. Well, it's the Naval Academy. It's not like you're going to have a boatload of wrestlers from Campbell say, all right, we're going to Navy. Service academies don't work that way. I mean, I'm sure there are probably some athletes there that may have been considering the Naval Academy and probably have the grades to get in there, but you're not going to see this exodus to the Naval Academy, which you might see as Campbell fill up the transfer portal. Even more so than they have been known to do. But when you look at the situation now that you want to leave the cupboard better, filled than, or leave a place better than when you found it. If there is ever a description of that being 100% accurate. It is what Cary did at Campbell. That cupboard was empty. Now, does Campbell's administration say, all right, we like winning here. We like winning Southern Conference titles. We like putting guys on the podium. Who do they go after? Now that this is a much more desirable job, it is a much more desirable position than it was when Cary was interviewing for the job the first time around. I mean, you look at the line of coaches. You went Dave Auble to Billy Green, who was an alum, then to Joel Boardwine, then to Cary Kolat. So it's like, okay, you bookended Olympians in there, but when you look at Bowie's Creek, North Carolina now, you look at Campbell, it's not a laughing stock of Division I. It's not a laughing. You're not losing Division II teams on the regular anymore. You've got a program. You've got facilities. You've apparently got support from your administration. So Campbell is in a unique position here. They can continue the momentum and make a strong hire, or they can go back to what they used to be. I think if there's only one right decision here. You have to make a stellar hire and continue, because there's a ton of kids in that room. There's a lot to work with, and the next coach can come in and continue that success. And unfortunately, we know that Campbell's probably going to be that stepping stone job. You're looking to jump from Campbell to the ACC, Campbell to the Big Ten, Campbell to the EIWA. It's a mid-major school, and it's probably not a 20-year job for anybody, but Campbell should embrace that. Be like, look, we can give you everything you need to succeed. You make us win, we make you win, win-win for everybody. So that's one potential way to look at it. I really would be disappointed if everything that's happened in Bowie's Creek just falls off after this leaves, because I just, the feeling I get is that the administration does care about wrestling, and I think they had the opportunity to make a very unique, strong hire in the wake of Cary going to the Naval Academy.
And I think that's primarily one of Cary's biggest concern. He's invested so much for the last 6+ years. He doesn't want to go. He doesn't want it to go away. And there's stability up there at the Naval Academy. So he's like, I've been in conversations with them. I know how things are going on. He's like, but right now, I got to make sure everything that I build up and everything that these guys build up and all the investment that the administration put into this program doesn't fall by the wayside in 3 months. Everything we've done for 6.5 years. So I know he's looking to stabilize the situation, because you invest that amount of time into a program and that's a big chunk of your life. You don't want part of your life's work just to go away in a year when you put that much effort to it. So I know they're looking into all those things. I know those are priorities that are very much front and center on Cary's plate right now. So looking forward to having this interview with Cary. Again, it's going to be an exclusive interview with Cary Kolat here coming up. We'll keep you posted and notified on that. But yeah, it'll be fun to unpack that conversation.
Yeah, and be sure, if you guys are out there as we talk about programming, as we move forward, as we wrap up episode 133, if you've got topics that you think would be interesting for Matt and I to bounce back off, hit us up on Twitter. Send a message over at the RUDIS on Twitter and Instagram and all those social media places, and check out we've got some weekly specials out there floating around. So if you're kind of bummed out that you didn't get to wear some new wrestling stuff, go to therudis.com as the first thing you'll see wrestling indoors, and that's what we're going to do here with the show. That's what we're going to do in the sport of wrestling, and we hope you do as well. So for Matt Dernlan, this is Jason Bryant, episode 133 of the RUDIS Wrestling Podcast.